the rich diversity of important political phenomena. Yet this goes too far. If politics is about struggles for power, or about who gets what, when, and how, if it spans the public and private realms, and if it is a defining characteristic of all human associations, all things said about politics, then the content of global politics is potentially limitless. Where would we start, and where would we end, in describing such politics? This very short introduction takes a different approach. Raymond Aron, the great French historian and international relations scholar, wrote that international relations have no frontiers traced out in reality. They are not and cannot be materially separable from other social phenomena. What he meant is that international relations is a concept that scholars, practitioners, commentators, and people in their everyday lives use to define a particular domain of social life, a domain they imagine and construct through their actions. So if the traditional imagining of the international is too narrow and global politics too broad, what should be our focus? My big claim in this little book is that we should focus on the global organization of political authority and on the human and environmental consequences of such organization. Political authority is legitimate political power. It is power that is considered rightful. It is the form of political power that Ambrogio Lorenzetti, the early Renaissance artist, sought to capture in his famous Sienese fresco, The Allegory of Good Government. Lorenzetti portrays the male figure of the legitimate ruler as tied to the citizenry and surrounded by female figures representing the civic virtues of justice, concord, magnanimity, temperance, peace, fortitude, and prudence. Such a ruler, Lorenzetti writes at the bottom of the fresco, chooses never to turn his eyes from the resplendent faces of the virtues who sit around him, quoted in Stahn. This is, of course, a thoroughly gendered illustration of political authority, a point I return to in Chapter 3. It offers nonetheless a particular stark depiction of the differences between political authority and tyranny, political power that rests solely on coercion. These 14th century frescoes are interesting, not just because they help us grasp the nature of political authority as legitimate power, but because Lorenzetti painted them as an act of legitimation. Not all political power is legitimate. Coercive domination exists all too often, but Lorenzetti's artistic act embodies the abiding impulse to justify power, to turn domination into political authority. How political authority is organized has profound implications for human societies and, as we are increasingly aware, for the natural environments they inhabit. Think about sovereign states. They are now the dominant way of organizing political authority on the globe, centralizing legitimate political power within distinct territorially bounded units. This affects individuals' rights. Some states are authoritarian, others democracies. The functioning of economies. Some states have command economies, others are more liberal. The provision of health and education services. Some states have well-funded welfare systems, others do not. The diversity and inclusivity of cultural communities. Some states are multicultural, others strongly nationalistic. And the protection or exploitation of nature. Some states are greener than others. Just as importantly, the division of the world into almost 200 separate sovereign states generates its own pathologies, from interstate war to refugee crises, while at the same time placing real limits on humanity's capacity to address such problems. Throughout history, humans have experienced the organization of political authority, most palpably at local levels in their villages, tribes, municipalities, colonies, city-states, provinces, and nation-states. But these local authorities have usually been embedded in larger regional, imperial, interstate, transnational, and supranational configurations of political authority. For example, Native American tribes were often part of larger confederacies, such as the Iroquois League, which included the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca nations. Similarly,